A little while ago, DC Comics published Joekr, the Man Who Stopped Laughing, #4, including a backup story from Matthew Rosenberg, even though he's the main writer on that series as well. And there was a little bit of backlash to it. I don't know if you heard, but apparently the pregnant Joekr made the rounds. We talked about it here on the channel. Apparently everyone was talking about it, including Fox News. And well, once Fox News covers something with one of these jabroni comic book writers, they got to sit there and like throw their arms up like, I'm being attacked. So Matthew Rosenberg went to his Substack newsletter, which you probably didn't know exist. I didn't know it existed. Who gives a shit about what Ashcan Press has to say about things most of the time? But hey, I covered it here. And apparently there's a follow-up video about it. We're going to talk about it right here, about what Matthew Rosenberg had to say about the reaction to Prego Joekr. Matthew Rosenberg, DC writer behind the Joekr, the Man Who Stopped Laughing comic series that recently saw the Batman villain become pregnant and give birth to Zatanna's child, has responded to the controversy surrounding the surprising story twist in a newsletter. The writer first explained that despite the controversy surrounding the Joekr supposedly becoming transgender and giving birth to a child, none of that actually happens in the comics. This led him to joke that despite how this backlash has made social media unusable for him, his DMs have never been more exciting. Well, as long as your DMs are exciting, it doesn't matter what your reputation is in comic books. Now, I haven't seen all the other videos on Matthew Rosenberg and the story he wrote. I haven't seen the Fox News articles. I did get a screenshot of it, but I actually didn't read it because I don't really care what other people have to say about comic books. I just kind of concentrate on what I have to say. But I never thought the pregnant Joekr was a trans allegory, and I never thought the Joekr was actually trans. I just thought it was a stupid story. But really, in the end, the joke is on DC Comics. Well, on DC Comics fans, the people that were forced to pay an extra $1 for this Joekr, the Man Who Stopped Laughing comic book because there was an extra story from Matthew Rosenberg and Francisco Francavilla in the back of it, which was basically nonsense. And the worst part about it, if you watch my video, is it's not funny. I know it was supposed to be a joke. In fact, Matthew Rosenberg, I would imagine that 99.5% of all comic readers who actually read your comic book knew that it was supposed to be a joke. We knew that it wasn't supposed to be a trans allegory. We just also knew that it was stupid. This is what Matthew Rosenberg continued on. The backup stories by myself with the brilliant Francesco Francavilla on art are made to be sort of Silver Age style fever dreams of the Joekr that explore different non-continuity explanations of how there could be multiple Joekrs and other themes of the main book. So far, he's accidentally cloned himself in a magic mirror, faked his own death so that he could see what people say at his funeral, and accidentally had himself sewn to the body of a gorilla and one of his small henchmen, like some mythological 6-armed gorilla circus performer, homicidal clown centaur. In each issue, the events of the previous issue aren't discussed or acknowledged. That's really the second really big problem with it, is that it's not important and you shouldn't be charging people $1 for your stupid fever dreams about the Joekr and all the dumb little antics that you want to do with them. They're not important. It shouldn't be even in there. If there's going to be a backup Joekr story, the least that DC Comics can do is hire, I don't know, a good writer as a little reprieve for having to read the main story by Matthew Rosenberg about the Joekr because he's not talented. It's very unfortunate that DC Comics are learning the very real lessons that Marvel Comics and Marvel Comics fans have been, experiencing for the last decade or so. Matthew Rosenberg, despite the hype, I don't know why he was ever hyped. He's a never will be. He's not even a has-been. He's never, ever going to be a big deal in comic books because he's never actually going to be a good writer. You don't believe me? Let's hear it from the mouth of Matthew Rosenberg himself. Talking about the backup story, Rosenberg was quick to clarify, this isn't an allegory, a metaphor, or social commentary. It's a joke. However, the writer then immediately noted his support for transgender rights, having supported fundraisers and donated to several charities that support the cause. The writer joked that the folks at Fox News and the Post might look up to the Joekr and see him as an aspirational figure, before listing off many of his heinous crimes that include cannibalism, brutal killings, severe assault, and then sexual assault. But he thinks that these right-leaning outlets were kind of into that. Yeah, that's what I took away from all this, is that Fox News, they're really supporting cannibalism and sexual assault. Matthew Rosenberg actually said that. And of course, he admits that it was a joke, which I talked about as the biggest sin of this comic book when I reviewed just a little mini review of the story. It's not funny. Matthew Rosenberg isn't funny. There, he was just trying to make a joke about Fox News and the Post, and he wasn't funny there either. Like I said, the joke is on DC Comics and DC Comics fans, the idiots, like yours truly, that actually went out there and paid full cover price and got included an extra $1 for a Matthew Rosenberg backup story that isn't funny, isn't in continuity, and basically just sucks ass, like everything else that Matthew Rosenberg has been writing for the past 10 years, outside of 5 issues of Uncanny X-Men, where, in spite of himself, he actually managed to tell a pretty compelling story for about 3 or 4 months. And then it was over. He was back to the Matthew Rosenberg we all know and hate, the guy that's been bilking us out of money on major characters for almost a decade now. But he's really excited. He got his 15 minutes of fame, and he got attacked by Fox News, because in his mind, that somehow makes him relevant, rather than being outed and really exposed to people outside of comic books now as being completely untalented. I guess he missed that point of the story. Lastly, Rosenberg proposed that these outlets instead merely work on a cycle of feeding outrage and alienation to their audience in order to keep them engaged in anger, with no real consideration as to whether this accurately represents the news. Nonetheless, the writer appreciates how all of this controversy has offered a massive promotional boost for his Joekr series, concluding his newsletter that he has since heard a lot of retailers that it's actually selling out. Mr. Rosenberg, I know a kettle and it thinks you're black. Working on a cycle of outrage and alienation, I just wonder why you put that pregnant Joekr story in the comic book to begin with. Perhaps, just perhaps, you might have planned all of this. Perhaps you put it in there so that you would get some outrage, a little bit of anger. Maybe you're the one working on the cycle of outrage and alienation. I don't know if you've noticed this, but pretty much the entire mainstream comic book industry are working on fantagonism nowadays. They go out of their way to alienate and outrage their consumers, thinking that he's got the proof right there, the comic book's selling out. But did they actually order it to begin with? That might be the bigger issue, because we all know once James Tynion left that Joekr series, everyone left because they knew super talent boy Matthew Rosenberg was taking over. And then they remembered, they thought, Matthew Rosenberg, Ashcan Press, he's never wrote a comic book in his life worth the paper that it's printed on. And that continues to this day. You, sir, are the pot calling the kettle black. You, sir, are absolutely a hypocrite. You are working in a cycle of outrage and alienation. That's basically the business model of mainstream comic books from Marvel and DC, both of which hire your untalented ass so that you can outrage and alienate their customers. I guess keep them coming back because I guess controversy creates cash. That's what Eric Bischoff says, and it seems like DC and Marvel have taken that to heart. The only way you can get headlines nowadays is doing something to piss the fans off. If you write a good story, no one will cover it. But if you make the Joekr pregnant, lots of coverage on that one. And worse yet, what if you make it unfunny? Will people even notice that not a single one of your jokes landed in the entire comic book? I noticed, and I imagine pretty much every comic book reader out there also noticed as well, and they weren't surprised, because you, sir, are an absolute hack. You're one of the reasons mainstream comic books are dead in North America. You're the reason people have turned to manga. You're the reason adults are reading Dogman, to avoid shitty writers like Matthew Rosenberg, who are themselves part of the cycle of outrage and alienation going on with comic books to this day. You're the reason comic book shops are going under, because you can't write, and you haven't been able to write the entire fucking time that you've been in comic books, sir. That is a major problem. If you don't remember, or maybe you didn't actually see the video, I talked about this, and I pointed out the biggest crime with this comic book itself was not the pregnant Joekr. It was the fact that it was supposed to be funny, and there's not a laugh to be had. Definitely check the video out here. There's also a link in the video description.